off at 1:15, but there is one other race on the course at the moment. That's the reserve cruise of Isis and Goldie. They went off about 5 or 6 minutes ago, and our commentary team of Jonny Searle, Chris Baillieu and Barry Davies have been following its progress.
So let's look back at the start with Isis on the Middlesex side. That's nearer camera. Goldie on the far side. Goldie are Cambridge, Isis are Oxford. And slight discrepancy of where the stream was right at the start here, Jonny Searle.
Well, that's right, yeah. Oxford seemed to move off further to Middlesex right off the start, and move down maybe half a length quite quickly.
So, certainly that gave Goldie the initiative. They were a bit slower off the start, but they were able to seize the best of the stream, and their cruise went off more or less level after the first 20 or so strokes.
Goldie looking for a 9th successive victory. They lead in the competition 22-11, and they are stroked by their president, David Cassidy, who failed to win a place in the Blue Boat this year.
It is it's one of the things that Oxford have been aware of, that we've obviously lost the last 8, I think it is, Isis Goldie races. So there is a focus this year on really trying to get a good Isis crew out. I think Chris Nielsen, a New Zealand guy, has been coaching them.
Certainly Goldie were able to take an initial lead after the first minute. This is a highly rated Goldie crew. Certainly they've shown their ability to race close to the Blue Boat, so this is significant as a point of measurement.
Well, if Neil O'Donnell wasn't too sure at the start, the American Cox of Isis, he's certainly come back well, as we're looking across here from the Surrey side and from above.
That's right. I mean, there's maybe a third of a length between the crews there, and although Goldie looked to be a little more relaxed, a little more efficient, Oxford are certainly digging in and they're hanging in there at the moment.
And the advantage with Isis in terms of the first bend as they come down the end of the Fulham Reach.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing, if you've got the Middlesex station, the inside of that bend is to hold on early on in the race, so that there's a chance to lean on the crew on the outside of the bend. Obviously, if the crew in front is already 2 lengths ahead, there's not much the Isis Cox can do about the bend.
Well, certainly some aggressive coxing by the Isis Cox. James Berens, the umpire there from Cambridge, their president in '93, he warned Isis on that occasion.
I mean, obviously, I'm sure he's right with his warning there, but Oxford were coming the worst out of that. The 2-man there in Oxford, I think he missed about 3 strokes there, so it probably wasn't the best steering.
That was certainly a foul on the basis of disqualification.
And let's move a little further on in the race, and the competition continued. And Isis, who are having now back at the start with Isis row trying to get around the outside, really squeezing Susie Ellis in the Goldie boat.
Absolutely, and the clashes have still continuing on now. They've been locked in combat ever since the Black Boy, and Goldie just cannot get clear of Isis. It's a very, very spirited row by this Isis. I think Goldie may have been a touch complacent about their opposition here.
Well, that's the sort of race it's been, and that's the sort of race it continues to be as they now come down Chiswick Reach into Corney Reach with Barnes Bridge in the distance. They are absolutely side by side, and as you can see from the helicopter pictures, the advantage of the bend will come in Isis's favour.
Indeed, now this is the situation which every Middlesex crew hopes to find themselves in if they have to row around the outside of the bend. And now they've got a big advantage. This last Barnes Bridge bend is the most steep bend. It'll give 3/4 of a length advantage to Isis, and they now definitely have taken the lead. They have about a canvas over this Goldie crew. Now, if Goldie can hold on here, they will be a very, very brave crew.
This is an enormous bend. This last bend is probably worth maybe half, 3/4 of a length over a period of only, 3 or 4 minutes. I don't want to attempt fate, but I think the chance of Isis winning here are fairly high.
You can see how much it turns as they go under Barnes Bridge, which is roughly 3 minutes from the end of the race. Still quite a fair bit to go. Just passing Bandstand now.
Yes, they're still to come to the point of the bridge. Steering 2 crews through this bridge is very tricky, and so there could be more trouble as they come through this bridge. But Goldie are looking a bit tired. It's normally a very racy sort of crew. Those blades aren't as well covered as they need to be. I think they gave their all around that Surrey bend, a little bit like Oxford last year, and they're going to really suffer now.
I think the important thing here will be how the Isis Cox steers this bend. What he wants to do is hold Cambridge out, or hold Goldie out as long as he can, and then take the bends sharply, that pushes Goldie further across the river. But really, with this big advantage, everything's in favour of Oxford now, or ISIS.
Well, this is a really good performance. They haven't won since 1989, the ISIS crew. They weren't considered to really be in with much of a chance of ending that sequence, but certainly they have rowed very well after uncertain beginnings. The quality of determination has been very high, and as you can see, they've got clear water as they go under Barnes Bridge. It's really ISIS's for the losing.
Yeah, I think that's dead right. Now they're clear. They can move over if they want to and put puddles down and wash the Cambridge crew off, the Goldie crew. That'll make it harder for them. They have to row in rough water.
Certainly Goldie had a very soggy patch as they went between the bandstand and the bridge. The blades just were not slipping into the water anything like quick or hard enough. And ISIS have really got it their own way now. I think they've got at least half a length of clear water.
And there's a worried expression on the face of Chris Baillieu, because the way that the crews have raced in this race in terms of their stations is exactly what we're going to have in the blue boat. And if the Oxford blue boat can emulate their ISIS crew, then maybe they can end the sequence too. There's no doubt that the junior race, which has been well contested by Cambridge for such a long time, in enormous distances, the last 5 they've won by no less than 53.5 lengths. So this is payback time, I think, Johnny.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I haven't been that closely involved in the camp, but obviously these guys were really confident that they could be the ones to make that change. But to come from, I think it was about 13 or 14 lengths the ISIS crews have lost by last year, to come to win is brilliant.
A few names here: Rick Evelyn in the bow, Paul Simmons, Stuart Grieve, Ed Foster, Oliver Jones, Toby Eyre, who is the distant cousin, the man there with the beard, of Ethan Eyre, who was the president of Cambridge last year, Alex Cooper from Eton and Lincoln, and Simon Cottle from King's School. Chester and Oriel is the stroke, and the cox, Neil O'Donnell from the United States, giving a few messages here to the man that kept him out of the blue boat, Alex Greeny, for the big race to come.
Certainly it looks ominous, not just for Goldie, who I think perhaps may have been a little overconfident of this race, but we know that the Goldie is not that far short in speed of the Cambridge blue boat, so one has to wonder what the messages are.
Let's hope the message is that Oxford improved a bit. Well, sorry, let's not all hope that, I'm sure.
Well, it's a very rhythmic performance by Oxford, who've not been, by ISIS here, who've not been getting too many plaudits in practice, but come the day is what counts. And this is impressive stuff.
They've certainly got it all their own way. This is something we've been used to seeing from Goldie crews for the last, as we said, 8-9 years, and that run has come to an end. Very significant from the point of view of, I think, future building of Oxford rowing. Cambridge will certainly have to watch their laurels.
And it's pretty quick, 16:55 indication as we come up now to the finishing line. ISIS have beaten Goldie, and beaten them by some distance. Just over 17 minutes. The new finishing post, you'll note there. And the junior race has been won by ISIS to their obvious delight.
The traditional 3 cheers there.
with a few fairly aggressive expressions.
Yeah, I think you can see from the faces of Goldie, they're clapping the victors now. That they had I think it came as a real shock to them, without doubt.
Is there to be another shock to come, Steve? ISIS successful against Goldie.
An ISIS win, and from off the Middlesex station as well. Now, what kind of boost will that give Oxford?
That's a tremendous victory, absolute tremendous victory. Goldie have been winning year in, year out now. Now, whether or not they get that back to the blue boat is another thing. If I was the coach, if I was Sean Bowden, I'd get a little whisper back to the blue boat and say, look, we've won on Middlesex. Now it's our race again now. We've got to take on the main race.
The win off Middlesex, does that tell us anything about the way the river is running?
I don't really think today it's fairly even. It doesn't really say too much about the way the river's running. It's the tactics. The tactics won for ISIS there. So now the blue boat have got to go off. They've got to make sure they win the Fulham Bend and then hold around that big Hammersmith Bend. We harper on about it year in, year out. ISIS have obviously done it, and now it's for the blue boat, the Oxford blue boat, to do it as well.
Now, the tactics seem to come, and we always say this as well, in a large part from the coxes. In your sport, is this the one event where the cox plays a bigger role than in any other.
It's very, very important because it's a two-horse race. And so you have a race plan, and obviously, as the race develops, you have to develop your race plan, turn it around, change it as the race goes on. Here again, you've got to look at the fact that the Oxford boat are on the outside, or the inside for the first bend, so they've got to really take that. That's the tactic, to take that race on the inside, and then the Cambridge tactics will be to hold on. And so it's for the Cox really to inspire. They really have to inspire both their crews today in the first 3.5 minutes of the race.
At the moment, both crews are way downriver, and the Cox's role at this point will be to calm the nerves or to beef the fellas up, or what?
The talking has been done now, really. So what you do now, you go through your race plan. They'll have a few berths to do, a couple of practice starts. They'll sit calmly for a couple of minutes, and you go through, you'll say one more time before they come through Putney Bridge and sit on the state boats. Both Coxes will have, they might have a little sign call, a special sort of few things they've been developing on the last couple of weeks, and they'll just remind that. And most importantly, it's the last 6 months.
Okay, and most importantly, from the umpire's point of view, they must behave as well. As we heard last year and heard once again at the beginning of the programme, the voice of the umpire can tend to dominate proceedings as he struggles to keep order and discipline between the crews, especially in those early exchanges. The umpire this year is the experienced Mike Sweeney, and I've been talking to him about his role. Mike Sweeney, this great event seems to have become more and more competitive down the years. How difficult has the umpire's task become?
Oh, it's always a difficult task, and the potential for even disaster is always there. So you're really on the edge all the time. But it's nothing new. And I was looking back through the history books. The 1829, the very first boat race, there were 2 umpires. They had 2 umpires, one for each crew, for the first 5 years, until they finally agreed that they would not have deliberate fouling and that they would obey the rules.
Last year we saw the crews coming very closely, not for the first time. Last year, looking back on it, how close were Cambridge to being disqualified?
Oh, very close. But you've got to realise that what needs to take place, or doesn't need to take place, but the necessary preliminary for disqualification is a foul. Physical contact has got to take place. There's got to be a clash of the oars, a really solid clash of oars, or even oars hitting boats in the worst possible instance. And once the foul occurs, then if one of the Coxes has been consistently warned at that point, then it's really quite simple for the umpire.
The umpire last year was very patient. What is likely to be your level of tolerance?
Well, there was not a real foul last year. There might have been very, very close, and they were. And that's the reason why the umpire was really stymied. I have spent Thursday with the 2 Coxes. I've made it very clear to them that it's their race, it's a private race. My job is to get them from one end to the other in as good a fashion as possible, a good, clean race. If they cooperate and they do what I tell them, then we'll get there. And if they don't, then they take big risks.
And the reaction of the Coxes in your discussions suggests that they're in a mood to cooperate?
That's my impression, but we'll just wait and see.
And Garry Herbert, if you were a Cox in this race, you'd heed the umpire's warning, but you'd want to be aggressive, wouldn't you?
You have to be. Today is aggressive, especially on the Isis Goldie result. Both Coxes know a lot depends on them.
And once again, if you were a Cox in this race, which boat would you prefer to be in?
I can't say now. With the Isis result, I'd still want to be in the Cambridge boat. Cambridge boat.
It's going to be close, though. The 144th University Boat Race for the Beefeater Gin Trophy. They'll be making their way to the start very shortly. And the race will be described for us by Chris Baillieu, by Jonny Searle, and Barry Davies.
Well, this is the moment when the crews just get their nerves out of their system. But before we talk about the individuals, let's talk about this decision of Andrew Lindsay, the president of Oxford, to go for Middlesex. The last Oxford success was from the Middlesex station, but it's worth noting that since the war, Middlesex has been chosen 7 times and only 3 times successfully. The last time was the so-called Mutiny boat in 1987.
Well, I presume the thinking there is that the way the race goes now, it seems to be going now, is that it's going to last for 10 minutes or 9 or 10 minutes. And if it gets that far, that's round past the Surrey Bend, past Hammersmith. From that point on, I think the psychological edge then goes back to the crew on the Middlesex side, who know they've got the advantage of that enormous last bend that we've just seen ISIS use.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think certainly the crews are so well prepared now. They're in a position to race very much the whole way. there is obviously an inherent gamble by Oxford here that Cambridge are not as fast as they are around the first part of the first bend, and that Cambridge can't get away from them under Hammersmith, and we're going to have to wait and see. But I have to say the outcome of the Isis Goldie race is quite ominous in this respect.
Well, as we saw from the Isis Goldie race, conditions quite quick, water quite flat. There's barely a breath of wind today. That's the Oxford boat we're looking at, so let's actually look at and see who sits where, with comment about the crew from Jonny Searle.
Well, I think, although on paper Cambridge are probably favourites because they have these experienced people, but the key probably to the Oxford performance will be how their young guys perform. Charlie Humphreys, James Roycroft, Ed Coode, Andrew Lindsay, all old Etonians and old Hampton schoolboys, junior internationals who may go on to be our Olympians of the future. Now, if this is the beginning of their careers, if that makes sense, then I think Oxford are in with an excellent chance.
In that lineup, 6 blues, 5 from last year, 1 from 1996, 3 internationals. They're drawn from 6 colleges, 6 British, 1 American, 1 German, 1 Swede. Cambridge have arrived at the stake boat earlier, which is the same that happened last year. So, Chris Baillieu, your view of this heavy and tall Cambridge 8?
Indeed, the heaviest and the tallest. And this year Cambridge were spoilt for choice in that they had certainly 10 or 12 people they could select for this 8, and they've come out with the biggest possible combination. They've put the 2 Germans, who are both former world champions in this event, in the stern, and I think we'll have to watch carefully Mark Weber, who's a very controlled, composed stroke, with the great power, the biggest man in the race, Stefan Forster, behind him at 7. And a key man too, I think, Alex Story, the British international. Now, Alex was quite seriously injured following his rowing in the British 8 last summer, and he didn't actually come back to training until, well, after Christmas, and I think his fitness is a little bit suspect. But last year he played a key role in this race, rowing at 7, and I think we'll have to see how he forms up today. Behind him there's a mix of youth and experience, and of course the Cambridge have got 2 people who learnt their rowing entirely at Cambridge, so they're probably the least experienced in the race.
One of the Oxford crew said to me that they may be big, but they're not as strong as they are big. Is he using some wishful thinking?
I think that is wishful thinking, but of course it is a question of how you employ your strength. It's a question of whether you're able to use it efficiently. There's an old saying that, you know, good big uns will beat good small uns, but that's only if all things are equal. And the Oxford crew is a sizable crew. It's 14 stone average. It's the same sort of size as the 2 crews were last year. It's just that this crew is exceptionally large. And the problem really is that their actual length and size can be a problem. They've actually got to move quickly and smoothly in unison. It's this harmony, this dynamic harmony they're seeking for, which I think Cambridge have found quite hard to achieve over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot made of the size difference between crews sometimes, but if we look internationally, the sort of British crews that have got medals in the 8th event in the last few years have only been about 14 stone. And there is a point, there's a minimum amount of power you need to move the 8, but I think the difference between 14 and 15 is not as big as is sometimes made out.
Well, there is Alex Greeny from Abingdon School, St Edmund Hall. It's a real test for him. He might be happier being on the Middlesex station. He knows he's got a crew that presumably, Johnny, are hoping to get away clean at the start.
Yeah, I think Oxford will be quicker off in the first 30 seconds or so. Now, obviously the first 30 seconds isn't the race, but if they're still in contention, I think he came out from last year's race in a bad light. I think probably because he'd been warned not to get involved in any clashing. I'm sure he'd like to be his own man a bit more this year and show everyone that it's almost, you know, the blame he was given perhaps isn't appropriate.
One quite critical factor this year is Mike Sweeney has very strong views about how to set the stake boats. That's the boats to which the 8s are attached, and he likes them much closer together because he thinks that actually they tend to keep that distance apart off the start. Last year they were set further apart and they came towards one another really very quickly. It will be interesting to see what that achieves this year. Certainly the Cambridge cocks will not be wanting to give any quarter.
There's a smiling Mike Sweeney, umpiring this race for the 6th time. There's a fair bit about rowing. He's the chairman of the Henley Royal Regatta and he's been an international umpire since 1982. He will not expect to exercise his vocal cords quite in the way that Tom Cadgew Hudson did last year. bag filled with the tops. The last moments. There, Charlie Humphreys in the bow, James Roycroft at 2, Jürgen Hecht 3, Swede Henrik Nielsen at 4, British international Ed Code, who said he would like to have the flag of Cornwall as well on his strip, but is not allowed to, of course. Andrew Lindsay, the president, who was 21 years old last Wednesday, incidentally. Paul Berger just in front of him in the 7th seat, and Nick Robinson. They looked very quiet and focused as they came out of their boathouse. And here, the light blues, Graham Smith, Paul Cunningham, Jonathan Bull, Greg Crombie, Toby Wallace, Alex Story, Stefan Forster, Mark Weber, and Alistair Potts, the cocks. It's the latest reenactment of an original challenge in March 1829 by Charles Merivale of Cambridge to his friend Charles Wordsworth of Oxford, who was the nephew of William. It's the 144th boat race, the 12th and last for the Beefeater Gin Trophy. At the end of an ideal sponsorship, the position is that Oxford won the first 6, Cambridge the last 5. Incidentally, it's 60 years since
Oxford,
this
ready.
race was first televised.
Cambridge, ready.
Fast runs the stream, quickly beats the pulse. Neither Cox is comfortable with the position of his boat as yet. It's not easy with the current going under you like that.
Attention! Come!
And away we go. Oxford, the nearer camera on the Middlesex station, and they're off to a bit of a flyer.
I think Oxford are quick in the first 30 seconds or so. My club crew raced against both of these two. Cambridge then at about 45 seconds really moved fast. It'll be interesting to see if they have that same change of pace today.
This shot is from a new camera we're offering you from a catamaran, which is going alongside the boat, so you can see what the advantage is. Very slight to Oxford.
Very, very slight, and it's interesting that there obviously wasn't very much off the boats. The pundits were a bit divided on this, but certainly the two have got off more or less stroke for stroke. There's nothing between them as they race down the first minute or so.
I think as the crews have just settled down, they settle down now into a sort of race pace that they'll aim to go for the next 4 or 5 minutes now. Looks like possibly Cambridge a little bit quicker. I'm not sure, it's hard to work with the television angle, but I think Cambridge may be a fraction ahead.
Well, so far, Alex Greeny found the water that he wanted rather quicker than his colleague in the ISIS boat. Long way to go yet. As we look at them from above, and it does seem that Cambridge do have the slight advantage, but Alex Greeny will want to hold them out as far as he can at the end of Fulham Reach. First shouts from the umpire.
Indeed, and I think he'll be trying to keep them apart at this point because they're moving towards the first bend. You can see there's already some disturbance from the blades coming close together. They've responded there. They've moved apart. They're now a safe distance apart, but there's only perhaps an inch or two to Oxford at the moment. It's very little, perhaps an odd foot.
Now this is a point where Oxford have got to dig in. They should be all right to hold their line to the bend. Alex Greeny will try to hold on as long as he can in a straight line.
Cambridge are being warned. They're wanting to turn, and Alex Greeny won't let them. We're having another good contest as last year. The blades are very close.
And certainly in practice, the Cambridge Cox has shown a proclivity for cutting this bend. It's certainly the way he wants to go, is to push wide towards Middlesex. But they've just pulled apart a bit again. Safety again for a few minutes.
At the rehearsal in Launches, Alistair Potts was on the other station, and people were really surprised how he cut the bend so sharply.
Yeah, you can see how the water's really chopping up there. That was a little bit I don't know if the launch wash or something like that. That'll throw the crews off a little bit. Oxford seem to be coming slightly better out of the clashing there. very important at this point to keep an eye on your oar. You'll see the people looking around at their oars.
Oh, they're in serious trouble now. There is a real danger here. This is definitely a foul. There's contact between the boats. Unless they get apart here, we could really see something most serious. That could be a disqualification. But they have pulled apart. The question is who's taken advantage of this. And they're still coming back towards one another. There's absolutely no give being given here. Oxford determined to hold their line, but Cambridge are coming back in again.
I think the umpire just warned Oxford there. He's saying that he's happy with them where they are at the moment.
Cambridge, move!
And it's a repeat of last year in terms of the amount of noise we're hearing from the umpire. But Alex Greeley coaxing it in a rather different fashion. The aggression is there this time from him. Last year it said he was under instructions for a clean race. Flick of the rudder would certainly have brought a disqualification at the right moment. Not an easy day for the most experienced umpire.
Now, this is a crucial bit of the race here. We're 3 or 4 minutes into it. This is a point where we'll have to see whether Oxford have really had to burn to stay in contact, or whether the two crews are equally composed and equally relaxed.
And Cambridge have seized perhaps the initiative. They've got a third of a length. They've managed to hold off the first bend. The first bend's worth between a third and a half a length, so Cambridge have gone about 3/4 of a length faster perhaps, or certainly half to 3/4. The question is what this took out of them, as Jonny said. They've now got about 2 minutes of straight rowing before they have to think about the next bend, which will be very much to Cambridge's favour as they come towards Hammersmith.
I just think if you look technically here, you can just see the Oxford blades are just holding up in the air before they go into the water. Cambridge is just going in that little bit quicker. And the Oxford blades miss a little bit of water, so they can't pull on that bit of water, and you can then see the effect on the boat speeds there. Cambridge are moving just a fraction quicker, I think, at the moment.
Well, the umpire decides where the stream is, and he's just a little closer over to the Cambridge boat. Oxford being forced a little wider than they would want to go, a little wider towards the Middlesex station.
And Cambridge have settled very low. They're at 34.5 strokes a minute, which is certainly very comfortable for them. They're capable of going a lot further at that rate. And they've got half a length. I think we might see something from them very soon as they come up towards Hammersmith. They're going to want to get more than that. It's stroke for stroke rate-wise.
Well, during their years of success, Cambridge, this is where they've gone away, between Harrods Wharf and Hammersmith Bridge. Although last year, of course, they were on the Middlesex station, had to come round the outside, but the previous years they were where they wanted to be.
This is a sort of period of any race which is absolutely crucial. 2/3 of a length behind another boat. It's the kind of point where the longer this position goes on, the weaker the crew in front feel. So it's absolutely vital for Cambridge here, if they are to win, that they push on and they push clear.
And this is where Oxford are going to try and hold on to them as they come towards that bend. And we've had the times from the milepost. 3:33, that's 2 seconds outside the record. Fast conditions.
That's Hammersmith Bridge. And you can see how the bend now works in the favour of the light blue crew, Cambridge on the Surrey station, but Oxford hanging on and hanging on well. The roles now reversed from last year, where it was Cambridge who were hanging on. Weber setting a nice, comfortable rhythm.
This way Oxford must dig in. Then we're going to throw everything they can in to hold Cambridge round this bend, because if Cambridge get round this bend, they'll begin to wash Oxford off, and once they're in the puddles, they'll go from 3/4 of a length up to a length and a half like that. It will take no time.
And certainly Cambridge put in a push there. They raised their rate of striking, that's the number of strokes a minute, from 34 to 36, and Oxford responded, trying to hold on to them. But this is the crucial part of this bend, because within a minute it's going to start to flatten out. So Cambridge will want to be taking advantage now if they can. And they seem to be moving on a bit at this point. They've got nearly the length.
This is where the weight and the long levers comes very much into being.
You can see that shot there. Oxford have just lifted their rating a bit. They're throwing everything in now.
6:20 the time for Cambridge at Hammersmith Bridge. Let's get a Cox's view of how they're doing. Let's join Garry Herbert.
Yeah, it's looking an absolutely brilliant race here. I'm just watching Alex Greeley, and he's urging his men on. They've just got clear water now, Cambridge. So Alex has got to keep on top of them and keep pushing. But Alistair Potts there now. He's moved his men around. They've taken a fine advantage of this big Hammersmith bend. I haven't been too impressed with the way that Cambridge have been looking. Now they're just starting to settle down, and the two Germans are just going to move away, I can imagine.
And the official times for Hammersmith Bridge was 6:20, which is a new record, beating the 1993 time of another Cambridge crew, Oxford, at 6:23. This is on for a record all the way, and there is now water between the two crews, and they're almost line astead.
This is quite interesting, because usually what happens is when the crew in front get to this point of length up, they move straight out to about 2 lengths, and the race is effectively over. But in this situation, it maybe has cost Cambridge a lot to get that clear water, and as I said, the longer the race goes on, the more it comes back into Oxford's favour, because if they can be in contact when they get near the Middlesex bend, Cambridge will have to move back to their station.
Certainly, Alistair Potts is trying to get as far ahead as he can. Cambridge have moved up to nearly 37 strokes a minute. They're trying to get clear of them. They're trying to throw the water from their puddles down on top of Oxford to make it more uncomfortable for them, steal their station, steal their water, so they can get as far away from them and discourage them from coming back on terms as they come towards the end of Chiswick Ayr.
Just to reiterate the point of the puddles, you can see the boat there going through the puddles formed by the bow side of the Cambridge boat. So very choppy for them.
It begins, the boat begins to get very unstable if there's those big puddles coming underneath, and if it's unstable, you begin to tense up, and obviously when the tension comes in, the rhythm can disappear there.
Determination, the grit of the teeth of Alex Story, who's had so much of a problem with his back. Brad Crombie with the very short haircut he gave himself this week.
Certainly, Oxford managed to hold on a bit there. Cambridge made a big push and got away a bit, and I think Oxford have crept back a bit towards them. There's probably nearly 2/3, 3/4 of a length of daylight between the boats, though, and Cambridge have actually moved over more onto the Middlesex side. They've actually stolen Oxford's water. They will, of course, have to give way if Oxford come back on terms.
They're coming up towards Chiswick Steps, which is at 2 miles and 1,020 yards. Must say, I'm impressed with Graham Smith, the bowman. Looks very, very composed and neat in what he's doing there. Would you agree, Chris?
Absolutely. They're of course, immensely experienced people. You know, Graham has been representing his country since he was 15. He was one of our star junior internationals. He won medals, 2 golds and silver in consecutive years. But I must say, Cambridge so far have shown composure and rode the Surrey Bend exactly as they should. But now we're coming back onto the final end of the Surrey Bend, and then things move more to Oxford's favour, and they're still there. They're not that far back.
They have, as we've seen, Oxford, they have looked quite relaxed. It may be that if Cambridge have put in too much to get clear and to hang on, but as this final bend comes, Oxford may be able to respond.
Paul Berger looks as though he's suffering a little bit there for me, the man in the 7th seat for Oxford.
Yes, certainly I suppose I would rather be in the Cambridge boat at this point.
It's looking very good for Mark Faber's crew to square the tally in this competition for the Beefeater Gin Trophy.
Looking at this shot, it's very interesting to see how Cambridge are really drawing the blade right through. I think this is one of the differences between these two crews. They're very strong in that last part of the stroke, sending the boat away. You can see the rhythm being driven off the finish. It's looking very solid at this point. I think they're well on top of their work. They're hurting because they've been rowing extremely hard for over 10 minutes now. They're right on the edge here. This is the difficulty of rowing. If you put in too many big efforts, it can just take you right over the top. But this is very long, this is very strong rowing.
And it's a hard time for being in the Cambridge boat, because you know you can only lose it from here, but really it's not that
Harrison
likely.
is worth looking at with Oxford, who do certainly look very laboured. It's becoming very hard work for Nick Robinson. Cambridge 9:56, which the record stands at 10:12. We could have the fastest race of all time here. Oxford at 10:01. That's the time at Chiswick Steps.
So I think Cambridge are really beginning to live up to their potential. They haven't really put a foot wrong. There were clearly some very anxious moments in the first mile or so. But this is a crew, remember, which is nearly 6'5.5" tall average, and they're making it look easy. They always say if you can't make it easy, you can't do it at all, and they're certainly doing it here.
It is a beautiful rhythm that we've become used to seeing from Robin Williams' crews with the assistance of Harry Mann, although of course it was Sean Bowden with John Wilson who started the Cambridge success. Sean Bowden now the coach of Oxford, who looks as though he's going to start his contract there with a defeat. That's the Barnes Railway Bridge. As we're coming past, we've just passed the bandstand. They turn, the advantage of station has become irrelevant because Cambridge are in total control of the race.
And Cambridge actually have dropped the rate right down now. They're down to about 32, which means perhaps they're not looking straight to the record, but they're still keeping the power on. You can see that. And there, by comparison, is Oxford. Just see how much less power there is on those blades as they go in. They gave everything to get on terms on that bend, and they won the toss, took the gamble, but I don't think they've got enough left looking at them.
No, I don't think that even the greatest supporter of Oxford would see any comeback from here.
I'm trying to, but yeah, I think even when you see those shots from behind, you can see the faces and the power and the connection. If that kind of power is connected to the boat, it obviously makes the boat go faster. Oxford just don't have that power at this point. That may well be because they just shot their bolt early on.
Got the flotilla of boats following the University boat race, which is still on course for being a record 16:45 set by Oxford in 1984 is the record. It's that same crew who held the record at Barnes Bridge. We'll get the times for that in a moment.
I think we're 15 seconds ahead at the last mark. I think they've got every chance of beating the record. That's a big margin to be ahead of the record, particularly on a still day like today. So much of the record is dependent on how the tide is. There's obviously a big tide flowing in today.
And both crews way ahead of the record at Barnes Bridge. 13:32 for Cambridge, 13:38 for Oxford. The record set in 1984, 13:57.
Looks as if they're going to take a big bump out of this record. And this crew's still rowing very long and very strong. They're really showing their potential. It's really come right for Cambridge. In the last 2 years, they've shown this. In the last 2 or 3 days before the race, they've come up to perfection. And I think Robin Williams is to be commended. He's done it yet again by the look of things. Just look how consistent it is. All year they spend what amounts to 1 hour training for each stroke of this race, just to get it perfect on the day.
Yeah, and they're certainly not easing off there, are they? Maybe they're aware that they're getting close to the record, but they're certainly they're sticking it in.
They're certainly a sort of solid 34. They had a bit of a rest just before Barnes Bridge, I think. But I think they're beginning to wind it up now. It's beginning to go up. You can see the rate lifting as they start to quicken. They smell the finish.
You have to be a man who's won this race several times, 4 times, to make a comment like that, having a bit of a rest. All things are relative in life. Cambridge coming around the final bend, coming towards the finish. They will smell the Mortlake Brewery now. That's Chiswick Bridge in the distance. And the new finish post just caught a slight glance off on the right. And it's certainly going to be a new record, and very comfortably too. 16:45 the time to beat, and Cambridge are destroying that previous time. And the fact that it was set by Oxford will be all that bit sweeter for them. Here they come, the last few strokes of a hugely impressive row, and they have won the boat race for the 6th consecutive time, and that matches their best sequence since the war. And Robin Williams will have been proved in his point that his crew is potentially the best that he'd had. Oxford beaten by a tremendously powerful crew who've certainly given their all here, to judge from Bull and Crombie, and so have they. It is an awful thing. They all know from the start that winning is everything, but only the losers really know how that feels.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there was always the question of, so a lot of those Oxford blokes have lost the race before, whether that's a spur to turn the thing around, or whether it's something that nags in the back of your mind. I imagine there comes a point where
16:28 is the winning time, and it's significant that there isn't huge rejoicing. They have given their all. 16:19 for Cambridge, I beg your pardon. Thought that didn't sound too right. Oxford 16:28, so both well inside the previous record.
I'm sure Cambridge are as pleased to have won. The record will come later, but they didn't really put a foot wrong at all today. They rode immaculately, they withstood the pressure, and they just did the job they were out there to do. It was very solid. The surprise actually was the Goldie Isis race, was perhaps, but for Cambridge it was a very, very satisfactory day.
And it's always the same. If you're successful in the junior race, you go and you watch the other race. You can't be joyful, can you?
No, not really. I suppose I can fall back on the old "it looks good for the future" sort of line, and let's hope that's right.
Well, that's of course how Cambridge started to rebuild in the early 90s. They started by winning the Isis Goldie race, and Cambridge have to look to their laurels. Both universities are turning out top-class crews year after year at the moment, and something has to give. All runs do come to an end. We just hope that it's not next year.
Well, it certainly brought symmetry to the battle for the Beefeater Gin Trophy, and it'll be interesting to see who will come forward to be the sponsor for the race in future. Surely they will see from the success that Beefeater have had to the benefit of both universities. But this is an opportunity not to miss.
It's certainly a very special event. It's different, I think, to most other sport that receives this sort of levels of media coverage. We really do have 18 people here racing for the honour, if you like, of representing their university. It's an anachronistic battle in many ways, but it's still one which I think captures the popular imagination. And we saw all the determination and the grit, which I think can be associated with best boat races today.
I think that's right. It still is that traditional event, and we've been very aware of that to try to keep it in that context. It really is 8 students, and I know there's talk about Americans and foreign graduates, but it's an important thing that it remains a student event, I think.
Yes, and in the successful Cambridge boat, 6 from Britain, 2 Germans, 1 Canadian, 4 undergraduates and 5 graduates. And that's David Cassidy, the president of Cambridge, who couldn't find a place in the boat, who applauds the blue boat in. He, I hope, will go to accept the trophy after his own personal disappointment having been the stroke of the Goldie crew. It's not been easy for him being in one crew and having to tend to the needs and the spirit of the other crew. I mean, when John Carver had the problem, he was injured and couldn't compete. David Cassidy has known exactly how Ed Bellamy of Oxford felt 12 months ago.
It's one of those weird things about the race, that as a president you're only one man in the boat, but you have an awful lot of weight on your shoulders. I would imagine it's even harder for him. He's got all the weight on his shoulders, but he's not even in the boat to put the performance in if it matters.
And disappointing too, because last year, of course, he was in the winning Cambridge boat as a blue, so it has been difficult. But he's done his job. He's won the boat race. That is how he'll be remembered. He is a winning president, and I don't think we should take it away from him. He's done all he can. He's been successful. His crew has.
All the Goldie crew down to congratulate the successful blue boat. Brad Crombie has certainly enjoyed it. Embraced his Mark Weber. Huge other German there with the glasses, Stefan Forster. Major factor. Donald Leggett, one of the coaches of the Goldie boat. Not often on the losing side. But it was a record-winning performance in 16 minutes and 19 seconds, destroying the previous record. And this was how Cambridge enjoyed the success. Not as in as extrovert a manner as previously, which was indicative of the battle they'd had to put up.
I think it also indicates the fact that inside themselves they obviously knew they were a better crew, and that often gives that reaction that it's a sort of relief at having won, rather than sometimes when there's really some uncertainty in their minds about who might win.
I think so. They were not a very extrovert crew. They were a reflective crew, I think would be a fair comment on. But they'd done a job, but they had an extremely hard race to get there.
Well, it was a good contest early on. Oxford, having won the toss and chosen to be on the Middlesex side, wanted to get away if they could. They came very close to each other as they came at the start of the race. This is 2.5 minutes in, and look how close the blades were here. And there was indeed one quite big clump of blade on blade.
Here, look, you can see that's Ford's blade. Now, if he'd lost that, I think there would have to have been grounds for a disqualification.
To be fair, the three men, I think, in the Cambridge boat had a similar problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I think that's
not
the
a
point.
good way to finish the race, is it?
But what a pity it would have been, because we would have been denied one of the great performances of all time. In fact, the best performance on the record book, 16 minutes and 19 seconds.
Yeah, that race, that record has stood for a long time, and it's taken the combination, as always on the tideway, of an excellent crew with fair and fast conditions, which is exactly what we've had today.
That is a big margin. I think the record for the head of the river race, which is running the other direction, set by the national squad, is 16:30.
Yeah.
So, this is obviously a fast Cambridge crew.
That's Heidi Richardson there, the physiotherapist I referred to, and she was talking to Alex Story, a man who's had so many problems with his back. High water, we're waiting to hear from the winning crew. And here are the Cambridge cocks, Alistair Potts and the president, David Cassidy, and they're waiting to talk to Steve Ryder.
Alistair, first of all, great battle and a great time, record time.
Oh, I didn't know that. You're the first to tell me. That's great news, but it was always going to be fast today. A ripping tide and very good conditions to race in.
Record time by some margin. David Cassidy, you watched it back here, having rode with Goldie a little earlier. How well did these boys do?
Yeah, it was a clinical display. Watched them, they got off well, settled early, and just ground down the Oxford guys, and that crucial move just around Harrods, just before the bridge, pushed out, and I thought it was a pretty brave effort by the Oxford guys. Just after that, try and hang on. Mark seemed to lift our boat again, push on away, and in the end it looked comfortable, and I'm sure the guys wouldn't say it was that comfortable.
And how uncomfortable was it in that first 4 or 5 minutes?
Well, the race was a sprint. It was just a sprint for that psychological advantage of getting ahead, and by the time we were ahead, we were exhausted. That last 10 minutes was just fighting exhaustion. I've never sat in a boat feeling like that. And that is an enormous credit to Oxford. They pushed us and harried us and pushed us. And it was a tremendous effort by all 8 guys, and I'm so pleased. But I want to just pay credit to this man here, because he wasn't with us in the boat today, but without him this victory would have been impossible. He's done so much. To use a cliche, there were 10 men in the boat today.
Consolation for what happened early in the Goldie ISIS race, but as you look back at the extraordinary spectacle of the battle around the Fulham Bend, were you clashing? Did the blades clash at all?
Yeah, they clashed quite dramatically. Well, we knew that Oxford had picked the Middlesex station, presumably thinking they would get a good fast start, and they did. And we had to really take it to 105% to stick with them. But as they were being warned, and I thought, I can't give any more, the blades came together, and there was a fraction of a second where both boats seemed to stop, and I just yelled, go, 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 and we went from being a man down to a couple of men up in an instant, and in fact it was good for us, that clash, but a real battle for the whole thing, and I'm really proud of everybody here today.
From that point you went to a record-breaking victory. Congratulations to both of you, and I think the presentation is just a few moments away. But the Oxford president, it's always tough, isn't it, to try and absorb a moment like this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gutted. It's the second time around, and I don't know. I'll be back next year to put it right.
Alistair there was paying enormous tribute to the courage and the aggression that you showed, especially in the opening few minutes of that race.
Well, I mean, we thought that we were in with a chance to get away on that first bend, and we clashed. And then from then on, they came out the clash better than we did, and they managed to get away from that, I think. I mean, after that, I think we were still rowing well, but once they were a length ahead or whatever, they're in front of us, we had the rough water, and we weren't really rowing our best.
How much had that taken out of you, the battle around Fulham Bend and what they did around Surrey?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I thought that we were still rowing pretty well once they were ahead, and I mean, I think we still had a lot in reserve, but once you're up, the psychological advantage is so big that once you're up basically, and that's it.
They were inside the old record by a lot. You were inside it too. Is a small consolation in that?
Well, that's a surprise, but that's good.
You shared in another fine race, and the presentation is moments away. Thanks very much.
Well, defeat gracefully accepted by Andrew Lindsay. Disappointed last year. He said he thought he was focused, and then used his expression, he was away with the fairies. It just got out of his control. And again, That problem has been revisited on him this year. He is only in his second year doing geography. I think he might like to stand again for president, but it's tough. And it's amazing how these sequences go. But what a contrast between defeat and victory. Also, looking at Alistair Potts there, one does have to feel sorry for Alex Greeley, who's been disappointed twice with ISIS and now twice with the Oxford Blueboat. They're now getting ready, the Cambridge men, for the presentation, which will be made very shortly by the Chief Executive of Allied Domecq PLC, Mr. Tony Hales, who's the guest of honour today. And David Cassidy goes up to collect the last Beefeater Gin Trophy. Success for him, and it's made it 6 victories for each university during the time the race has been sponsored by Beefeater Gin. Tony Hales now will hand medals to all the other members of the crew. This is Toby Wallace, one to learn his rowing at Cambridge, and he has a considerable career, though he admits he's got to sort of fill out a little bit. Alex Story, it might be said, already has. John Bull certainly has. Brad Crombie, the Canadian, his second success, as it was for Alex Story. Mark Weber, the stroke, and Stephen Forster, the enormous man at number 7. Graham Smith, who only had the one opportunity and has taken full advantage of it in a brilliant crew. This gets better and better for Cambridge, who seem to have used the word brilliant on occasions before. Their sequence continues, 6 consecutive victories, and of course, while he gets his hands on the trophy, Alistair Potts will wait for the other prize that he gets when he will be hurled by the rest of the crew into the muddy Thames. A record-breaking boat race of 1998, the previous time comprehensively beaten by both crews. Oxford with a time of 16 minutes and 28 seconds, but ahead of them, one of, if not the best crew of all time in the boat race, Cambridge, with 16 minutes and 19 seconds. Again, it's a light blue day on the Thames.
1998 University boat race, Cambridge once again. Don't forget that we've still got highlights of last Sunday's race at Henley, the women's boat race, in a few minutes' time, and that big live rugby league, the first Challenge Cup semi-final, Salford against Sheffield Eagles. That kicks off at 2:45. We've got that live. But first, and before all that, let's start our afternoon's racing. 3